Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Transgender Show. I'm your host, Emily. I am grateful to welcome to the show tonight Alexis Vandom. Alexis is a 25-year-old transgender activist, screenwriter, and voice actress living her best life in the Pacific Northwest.
Hello. How's everybody doing?
Everyone, forgive my tongue-tiedness tonight, and welcome to the show, Alexis.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Why I'm grateful to have you on the show that others might not know is we had a late minute cancel, and we were trying to scramble the last couple days to get somebody to fill in, and we got to you early today, and you were willing to come on and fill in for us. So we're very grateful for you.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Hi, Mira. Hi, everybody in the chat. For those of you who might be new or just need a refresher, we will get to everybody's questions and comments after the break. We're going to go through some questions about Alexis's journey here. And then after that, like I said, we will get to all of your questions and comments. Please keep them coming in. We will get to them. Doesn't matter what they are or, have fun with them. You don't feel like anything is too silly or too deep or whatever. We will get to all of it. Within reason, I guess. I reserve the right to edit if there's something that's inappropriate, but other than that, we always love your comments and your interaction. Let's jump into your story, Alexis. Starting with my favorite question, how did you choose your name?
So my first name, I kind of got inspired by a character from Yu-Gi-Oh! GX named Alexis. At the same time, it just kind of fits, I think, just with just for some reason, it felt like it fit my personality.
Mm-hmm.
The last name has a bit more of a story to it. Vandom, some people may recognize that last name from a graphic novel series and television show, animated television show from the early 2000s called Witch. Because the main character's name was Will Vandom, and that's actually where I got the name from, because she was the first female character I felt a solid connection with as a kid. So kind of shaped my life in a way.
Very fun. So when did you first realize that you were transgender? When did that term first directly apply to you?
I guess I really started figuring it out around 21 to 22, in there somewhere. Originally thought I was gender fluid. I was like, when I came out to my friends, I told them, I was like, I'm 99% sure I'm binary transgender, but I kind of swap between feminine and masculine, so I'll go with gender fluid for now. It just seems to fit the best. I was experiencing what a lot of gender fluid people may refer to as swapping and stuff like that around that time. So I just felt like that worked the best for me. It was the best descriptor at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But as time went on, it became very clear that I was indeed binary transgender. And I figured that out age of 23.
Yeah, it's always interesting in the gender journey because there are so many possibilities and so many things to explore, and it's interesting to end up on the binary scale. Like, I consider myself extremely binary. I'm right on it. I know where I'm at. I stay there. The only times that I would, fluctuate back the other way is just dysphoria. And it's interesting to interview so many other people that find different places within the spectrum, which I was shown a really cool graphic the other day that has the line going diagonally, male and female, but then has gender fluid and agender on it as well. And then, I think those were the other axes on there. And so the ability to plot yourself on a graph across those different criteria is kind of fun. It's just like, yeah, but no, I'm still on this diagonal line.
Yeah, pretty much. That's a good way to describe it, I guess, or to visualize it.
Mm-hmm. So tracing back, once you understood that you were trans, were you able to look back at your childhood and kind of see breadcrumbs that, if you had had the language earlier, would have led you to the conclusion that you were trans?
Yes, I would say that for me, I had moments throughout my life before I started figuring myself out gender wise. I had little events, little happenings, little thoughts, little feelings, stuff like that throughout my life that just were out of place. They didn't fit, they didn't make sense. There was something that connected them all that I could not figure out, ranging from when I was about 10 years old. I was hanging out with a friend of mine, a guy friend, and we were. He had the bright idea of going and trying on his older sister's clothing as a prank, and wanted me to engage, do the same thing. And I desperately wanted to, but I was scared to death of his older sister coming home because she really did not like me anyway. And so I very, sadly had to say no to that. And then after he was done doing his thing and he got back in his regular clothes and we went outside to play football or whatever, I actually found myself looking back through that window into her room, seeing those clothes on the ground and just feeling this overwhelming urge to go in there and try them on. Something was drawing me to it. And I ended up shaking it off long enough to where when I actually asked if we could go back in and do it, she was about to be home, so he had to say no. So I kind of missed an opportunity there, I guess. But I mean, there's that. There's wanting to have a more feminine appearance as a younger child than that. Looking down and wondering why I didn't have breasts half the time. I mean, there was a lot there. Little and there was also other things like dissociation. I dealt with that constantly from the age of 10 onward. And I had what some people I imagine would classify as the typical egg train of thought, which was like, well, every guy wishes they were a girl, right? That kind of thing. So there were lots of little things that were different about me. I didn't feel like I fit in with guys, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And of course, with my upbringing and just in general, it's like, well, I'm supposed to feel like I do, but I feel separate from them all the time, and I don't know why. Like, not just when it comes to behavior and stuff like that, but just on a fundamental level that I couldn't describe. So I guess that's really the best way to sum it up is there were little things throughout my life that did not make sense. And when things finally started to click, there was a moment where I was thinking about it very intensely, and then I looked back through my life, and it just felt like all of the pieces suddenly came together.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, crap. Okay. Now what? It's kind of a scary realization, don't get me wrong,
Absolutely.
but definitely has paid off in spades.
Oh, that's good to hear. So what was it that brought about that moment that, we all describe? You mentioned eggs earlier, the egg cracking moment.
Nothing in particular. I've just always been an extremely introspective person. I'm neurodivergent, and so we're a little bit more prone to be looking inward a lot more often and stuff like that. And it all just kind of culminated in that moment. There was no particular catalyst.
Was it particularly difficult for you at that time to come to terms with the fact that you were trans? Was there a period where you kind of struggled with accepting that?
Um, Oddly, no. I didn't really have much of an issue accepting it so much as I was worried about the effect it would have on the relationships with my family and my friends and stuff like that.
Mhm. And during this time when you were going through that, did you have anybody you could turn to? Did you have like a role model or a confidant that had some experience with this?
Role model, no. Confidants, yes. I was working with a whole lot of other creative minded people at the time. And I was able to go to one in particular. Her name was Tina. She was the first person I told out of that entire group of people. And we were at a convention together. And she and I were just sitting on the stairway in the hotel, just talking about stuff. And well, really, I kind of pulled her out into the hallway to talk about it, but I was dancing around the subject for forever because I was nervous. And um, I came out to her as gender fluid, and she just immediately gave me this huge hug. And it was really, really awesome. And I ended up coming out to everybody else that night that was there. And then, just kind of step by step after that. And it was really pretty cool to have all those friends there who would accept me. And I figured they would. I mean, the group that, these friends of mine, most of them were LGBT. So, there weren't a whole lot of trans people in that group. There were a couple. But I figured based on all of that, plus just their social attitude in general, everything would be fine. But even so, I was still nervous.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I learned very quickly that I could, treat all of them as a confidant as far as all of this went. And they were the only people who knew for a little while.
That's so incredible that your first time trying to come out, or the first time in coming out, you found the perfect, confidant and the perfect person to tell who supported you. Because a lot of times that initial contact, that initial try, is really important to how well the rest of it goes, and basically our internal fears of how we'll be accepted by the greater world. Because there are a lot of tough conversations you have to have when you come out.
Yeah, definitely. I considered that group of friends of mine the safest people in my life to come out to, other than my significant other. My significant other, we got into the relationship. Goodness. I can't remember if we met before or after that initial coming out experience, but I do know that, she was also trans. And so, we were talking back and forth about stuff, and so that helped as well. Definitely.
So she was already an out trans woman?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So I don't remember if I'm pretty sure I told Tina and the rest of my friends before I met her. I don't remember for sure exactly. There was a lot going on at that time. But yeah, we didn't start dating until much later, but yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes it a lot easier, and that's something that I've noticed too, is having, trans friends and a trans girlfriend. Like, everything is significantly easier because there's all that common ground and understanding. There's so much you don't have to explain.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Definitely true.
So for the more difficult conversations with family, how did those go? First off, how did you approach them? And, what were the methods you used, and how successful were they?
So success levels were very different, depending on who I was talking to, which I kind of figured would be the case.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, with my mom, she's a very perceptive individual, so she didn't know. It shocked the hell out of her, but at the same time, she knew I was trying to dance around a subject, and
Mm-hmm.
so she picked up that there was something going on when I was talking to her when I went to visit her in March, and March being about 4 months after I had started transitioning. And so I told her, and she was upset, not at me, but at the situation. She was worried it was going to make my life more difficult and stuff like that. She was never upset at me over it, but just kind of like the situation was upsetting because it was very life altering, which I understand,
Yeah.
She told me though that I could not go without telling my stepdad. Like, it wasn't something, because I had come out to her as bisexual before that, and that she could keep to herself, but she was like, this is so overwhelming, I'm not sure I'd be able to, because I'm visibly going to be upset, when he comes home from work. So I'm going to need you, if you want to be the one to tell him, you're going to have to do it like really quick. And so actually, I figured that was the case. So I told him that night. That went really, really badly. Yeah, I had a lot of the cliche kind of extremely horribly misquoted Bible verses. Oh, your friends made you this way, blah, 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 blah. Just every cliche in the book was thrown my direction, and I fielded all of them pretty easily because he had done the same kind of thing when I had told him about my transgender girlfriend a couple months before that. So that, and it was what it was. We had a conversation the next morning that also did not go well at all. And yeah, so it was a pretty solid rejection from him at first.
Hmm.
He's kind of come around on the subject over time, not to the extent that anybody would wish their parent would.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like it's not as bad as it used to be. So, it's okay. My dad, more progressive minded guy, all I had to do was call him up and tell him, and he was like, "Oh, cool. Okay." That was about it.
Well, that's
And
good.
then, yeah, amazingly, my mom's parents, um, I I didn't know how that was going to go. I figured it was going to go maybe decently with my grandmother, but not well at all with my grandfather.
Mhm.
They were actually both completely accepting from the start.
Wow.
Like, just, yeah. And never expected that, but that's how that went. And then, just told a lot of my family members one by one after that.
Mhm.
Most of them received it well. Some of them were kind of indifferent, but I mean, my stepdad was the one that really stood out the most
Mhm. And you
as far
said
as
your
negativity goes.
mom kind of struggled with it a bit, and her biggest
Yeah,
concern was how it would affect your life and how much of a struggle it would be. You mentioned earlier that it's been worth everything. It's been worth all of it. Have you been able to kind of convey that to her and sway her on it and get her on board?
yeah, she's on board now. Yeah, basically, like I said, she was worried it was going to make my life hard, and it was also earth shaking for her because she had always thought of me as her son, and so thinking about calling me something different and thinking of me as a daughter instead of a son was going to be difficult.
Hmm.
It was pretty life altering, which I understand. I'm totally okay with giving a parent grace if that's the issue. Just getting used to it, okay. You know. Um. So yeah, over time though, it became very clear to her. I think that I was definitely a lot more myself after hormones had been started,
Hmm.
and I was a lot happier and stuff like that. So, and things have not been sunshine and rainbows for me, but at the same time, she could tell that overall I was doing better than I had been,
Hmm.
and that I was very secure in who I was. And I think that that probably helped things.
What was your experience like trying to find community in the beginning? I guess that's a silly question to ask. Never mind, because you already told us that you started with the community. It was already built in. Um, did
Yeah,
you
I guess.
did you well? And then you had a trans girlfriend. Let's strike
Yeah,
that one and
true.
move on.
True. That's fair.
Um, oh wow, we're already to this point. We've gotten to the big ethereal question that I like to ask folks, because I think it pulls out a really interesting answer a lot of the time. What does
Okay.
transition mean for you? What does it mean to you on a deep level?
I would say just bringing myself into alignment with who I am on the inside, as well as presenting my truest self to the world. I would say that that would be my definition of transition for me. I understand it's different for other people,
Hmm.
but that is the way that I personally view it. And that involves, of course, like it does for many people, it involves hormones and surgery and stuff like that, and social transition.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, that's the overall end goal, I think, is just to present my truest self to the world and, of course, present my truest self to myself as well, being secure in who I am.
And how far along are you in that process? How close to the alignment have you been able to achieve thus far?
Uh, I mean, I definitely have some things I want to do surgically and stuff like that, but other than that, 100%. I mean, I cannot at any point actually think, "Oh, I must be a guy. Oh, still cis though." None of that stuff. Like, nothing like that.
Hmm.
I present who I am to the world all the time. I bear all the time when it comes to what I think, who I am, stuff like that. And I'm presenting my truest self. And it's been an extremely rewarding process. And it
Oh, that's
still is.
wonderful to hear. Yeah, I still have days where I kind of struggle where I don't see the version of myself in the mirror that I want to see, and I even have times where I'm just like what am I doing sort of a thing. But then when I think about it, a very similar thing to you, like there's no way I could be a guy. There's just no way. It's like that's just such a ridiculous concept to even think about.
It really is. And I definitely understand, not seeing exactly what you want to see in the mirror. I still encounter that all the time. I haven't, for me, it's mostly physicality. I still haven't gotten facial feminization surgery. Hoping to
Hmm.
get that by the end of the year, stuff like that. So when it comes to physicality, yeah, I experience the same thing. When it comes to who I am spiritually and mentally, though, every time I look in the mirror, I see the person that I am,
Hmm.
if that makes any sense. I see things that I want to change on the outside, but on the inside, I'm in alignment.
Hmm. Yeah, I kind of wonder where those instances come from. Is it purely a physical thing? I think it's definitely sparked by that. Um, I think it's very difficult for a lot of us to feel comfortable in our new identity and our new gender because there's so much of it that we missed out on. I mean, I transitioned in, I think probably I'd say late 30s or early 40s was when I finally like really started. And there's just so much you miss out on, so much of training that it seems it comes easy for everybody else, and figuring that stuff out and getting there and feeling really comfortable in not in your own skin, but with the way you're acting and those sorts of things can be very tough for a lot of us.
Yeah, for me, I don't know if it was more the fact that I was just finally had the right hormones in my system, or if it was more that, or if it was more just the fact that I had finally done something to give my inner self the ability to finally shine on the outside that finally, or that unlocked that kind of behavioral aspect as you were talking about.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't mean, I don't mean like stereotypically feminine stuff. I just mean like in general. Behavior is in any action.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, all of that just kind of erupted out. And it's just never gone back. There's no putting that genie back in the bottle, you know?
Yeah. So along your journey, what were some of the key fears that you've had, and how did you overcome those?
Hmm. Well, there are some fears that I still haven't overcome completely. Um, Most of those are tied to current cultural issues and stuff like that. Um, but I guess I didn't really have many fears other than, is this the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Stuff like that. Those fears, I have to say, disappeared on the first day of hormone treatment, though,
Hmm.
because, it takes about, I did a little digging into this after the fact. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes or so for an estradiol pill to hit the system after it's swallowed. And the reason I'm bringing that up is I was having the worst anxiety of my life after I took that first one.
Wow.
I was
Hmm.
extremely scared, thinking, oh my God, what have I done? Am I doing the right thing? I was freaking out. But about 15 minutes after I did it, all of that, and my dissociation was off the charts. But all of a sudden, it was literally just a snap of the finger. And everything just stopped. And I got up and I was walking around, and suddenly I just felt extremely giddy and warm. I felt that dissociation finally roll back, that self negativity start disappearing extremely quickly. It absolutely blew my mind because I never in a million years expected for there to be an emotional impact that fast, ever. And it was, and some of that stuff came back as it wore off, but at the same time, it was like, my God, I had that much of an emotional impact from one try at this. Yeah, there's no way I'm going back. I just finally felt like, oh my goodness, for the first time in 13 years, I'm not dissociating. It was that profound of an impact.
That's so wonderful
So
to hear.
yeah, and I guess, you were asking me before the show if there's any unique aspect to my transition. I would say from the accounts that I've read, a lot of people don't have emotional impact that fast. Some do, but a lot don't. So I guess it's the closest thing to unique I've got.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We had I had to let the dog out and I thought I could do it cleverly. Um, I was just saying that I didn't notice that for myself taking the pills. It's wonderful that that is the way it was for Alexis, and I've heard that similar story for a couple people. But for some of us, yeah, it can take a while for that, to fill in. I feel my life is aligned, but I don't feel the direct connection with that to the HRT. I think as my body changes a little bit more, it'll sink in. But yeah, just different for all of us, I think.
Mhm.
So as you've moved along your journey, have your goals shifted in what you initially intended or was high on your priority list? Were there things that you thought you would never feel up to or were too afraid to that are now on your schedule?
No, when I went to get evaluated, actually, before I made the decision to get evaluated, the formal evaluation at the tail end of all the therapy I had already received by that point, I knew from that moment, if I'm doing this, I'm going the entire way. Like
Hmm.
the surgeries and everything. It was going to be all or nothing. So, actually, amazingly, no. No, that kind of the goals for transition and stuff have not shifted.
Hmm. How do you deal with dysphoria? Do you still struggle with that at times?
Yeah, I struggle with some body dysphoria, um, and some facial dysphoria, especially like right now, because I have to unfortunately let my facial hair grow a little bit because I have electrolysis in the morning. But and I also have vocal dysphoria sometimes.
Oh, nice.
Um, not so much anymore, but I mean that's a pretty recent development. Not having it as much. Um, because even as recently as a month ago, I was constantly asking my girlfriend, it's like, how do I sound? How do I sound? How do I sound? I actually asked her that today. It kind of broke my streak, but um, yeah, dysphoria is definitely a very difficult thing for me to deal with when it does hit,
Hmm.
or when it hits hard anyway. Um, and I don't. For me, there really is no way of dealing with it except just going through it and getting on the other side of it.
Mm.
So it does, sometimes result in me, crying a bit or getting upset for a while and then talking it out with someone and then just letting it resolve itself. I've
Mm.
learned for me, I know a lot of people have, some people have shortcuts. I don't have those. Not really. I mean, unless you count talking to someone as a shortcut, which I guess you could. But
What's important? It's important to have those people that you can talk to and talk through it and know that, it's just part of the process. It's part of, the situation that we deal with. But yeah, I do ask the follow-up question usually on that, what are some of the routine things that you do to find validation? You didn't attribute any of those things during when you have those extreme bouts of dysphoria. But are there things that you do on a day-to-day basis here and there to really affirm yourself?
not really. Um, no, when dysphoria hits for me, it's not a question of, you know, uh, do I l- do I look? I guess to an extent it does kind of hit. Like, do I look like a guy or sound like a guy or something like that? Especially the sound like a guy part. But I don't really have any daily thing that I do. I probably should, to be honest. But no, I really don't. Yeah, sorry, that's a non-answer, but yeah.
It's fine. They don't all have to be amazing. I'm just kind of inspired for some kind of segment or a show that we could do that's daily trans affirmations.
Yeah, no, I don't have any kind of daily affirmation thing that I do. I should, definitely.
So we talked about.
I hadn't really thought about doing that.
Yeah. I think I'm really bad about good habits and practices, things like that. But I think it's something that we should all do. The routines and just some of these things that we do our routines, put our makeup on, those sorts of things. But I think finding something that always makes you feel your gender, whether makes you feel super masculine or super feminine, just having that thing, being conscious of what that is, and saving that and remembering, okay, I'm feeling a little down. I don't feel like super me or super femme, and I'm gonna put this on. I'm gonna do this thing, and I'm gonna go out and strut and basically fake it till you make it.
Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah, I should probably have something like that I do.
We'll work and develop it in tandem. I like this idea. We talked about the fears that you have, that you had coming into it or throughout. What sort of hurdles have you run up against, and how did you get over those?
Hurdles as in like medical hurdles and stuff? Or?
Yeah, just basically any obstacles that you've had. You talked to your stepfather and he didn't accept it. And so there's sort of a family hurdle there. And luckily it didn't really affect your ability to move forward. You were already kind of going down that path. But I think for some people, it can be a bit of a blocker there. What sort of things, was there trouble getting approval for medical stuff or anything that you feel was an impediment to your journey that you've had to get past?
Yeah, there's definitely been some things. I think one of my worst hurdles has been myself on some things. A lot of it's executive functioning issues, ADHD over here. So, getting myself to actually go pursue something can be difficult. Definitely. And most of the time I just kind of have to push myself through it and remind myself of what the end result of that action will be. Like if I want to pursue, not something I've had to, kick off for a while, because I kicked it off a while ago, like going and trying to get surgical care or something like that. It's like part of me was kind of scared of doing that, and part of me was a little bit worried about that kind of thing. But I knew I wanted it. And that's kind of how I got through it. I thought about the end results. It's like kind of like an ends. I wouldn't say ends justify the means, but you get the idea. I just kind of remind myself as to what I'm chasing, and thinking, this fear is momentary. It's like, oh, I'm worried about wrestling with my insurance company or wrestling with a doctor or a counselor or whoever to get this thing. And it's like, okay, first of all, you haven't had to wrestle that much with therapists. You've had to wrestle with some doctors, but you end up figuring it out at the end of the day. There's no reason this time's going to be any different. So just, think about it that way. Just kind of eliminating reasons why I should be afraid in my mind kind of helps me overcome it sometimes. With doctors, I've definitely come across several doctors who they mean well, but they just don't know that much about HRT. It's something that I had to do a lot of my own research on and advocate for myself on and stuff like that. Had to switch doctors several times because of those kinds of things. As far as surgery goes, wrestling with insurance is the worst. But
Hmm.
that's not a trans specific thing. As anyone who's ever dealt with health insurance in their life can say, it's something's going to be a hassle at some point, very likely. It just happens to be that with me.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that's definitely a hurdle. I would say that I had to overcome some hurdles when it came to coming out to everyone else. Um, like, for example, I came out to my friend group, but my friend group was spread all over the country. It wasn't, or I didn't have any issues coming out to them, but I'm talking about like the people back home. Because I graduated high school in Northeast Alabama. So I had no idea how everyone back home would accept this. And I still don't know how some of them accepted it. But it was definitely successful in most ways. I think to an extent, probably because some of them had gone to university and stuff like that. And, had some, maybe met trans people for the first time ever and stuff like that, came to understand us a little
Hmm.
bit.
Has
That
it
probably played a role.
yeah.
But
Has it generally been your experience that the people that accept you are warm and, approach you about it, and the people that don't or may not just kind of slip back into the background?
what's interesting is, in my experience, a couple of people who haven't accepted it literally just vanished immediately. And I never heard from them again. But that's okay, because it's like anybody who reacts that way, I don't want to hear from you anyway. So, um, yeah, I haven't had somebody fade into the background like that over it. It was either a instant acceptance or an instant rejection and sayonara, other than my stepdad. So, you know, um, yeah. Yeah, like I said, a lot of my hurdles are in my own head.
Hmm.
Not a lot of them are in the external world as far as access to care and validation and stuff like that. I've been, I understand I've been kind of lucky in that regard.
Hmm. Well, and I brought up that point, to highlight that. I feel like for me going into it, it was terrifying to come out because the fear of what that backlash would be for people not accepting me, and it was
Oh,
more that
absolutely.
they stepped back, they disappeared, they didn't engage, and the people that came up in your face were the ones that were supportive. And I think
Yeah.
that's something that a lot of us don't realize going in, that that's going to be a lot of the case. There are several situations where you know trans people are in danger. It's usually from
Very
strangers and
true.
stuff like that, and the people that you're afraid to come out to. You do have to be ready for some loss and some people that can't accept it, but there isn't an aggressive backlash in general to it. From the experience that I've had, as far as like people, coworkers and things like that. So I know that's again something that could potentially be unique to my situation, but I found that sort of generally a good rule across. And then basically trying to give people the courage that if you come out and you do it and you're in a safe space, you're just not sure how people are going to react, like it's worth it. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I was in an interesting position because I was living in Tennessee when I first started hormones, but I didn't know anyone in Tennessee outside of work. I didn't tell them. I told a friend of mine, the friend of mine who got me the job that got me out of my parents' house. I told him, but that was it. He was the only one that knew for quite a while. But, that's actually something kind of interesting. What happened with my work? I was working as a security guard in Tennessee, very male dominated field. Very masculine when it comes to the attitudes inside the field and stuff like that. Not that there aren't women in the field, of course, but it's 9 to 1 probably. At least the places I was, and it was interesting because I was even having to take some hormones at work because I was working 64 hours a week. So I had to like take hormones at work and stuff like that as well. It was thankfully pills. But and just kind of go low key about it and not really say anything.
Hmm.
But I was worried about how they'd receive it. It's like not only is this, a very masculine field, right? But on top of that, it was also in Tennessee. But interestingly enough, I was actually outed to my entire workforce by another transgender individual who was on his way out, and he had an extremely big mouth. He had told me some stuff about some coworkers that I'm sure they didn't want spread around. And I had already told him about me before I knew that about him because he tells me he's a transgender guy. I'm like, hey, But yeah, he was on his way out of the. Apparently, he spilled a whole bunch of secrets about people on his way out the door because he was very mad at the company. And I was one of the people that he spilled the beans about. But what was so interesting was I didn't know that anyone knew for 2.5 months because no one said anything to me. Nobody treated me any differently. I had absolutely no clue. And then somebody accidentally let slip that they knew.
Mm.
And then I pulled on that thread and it unraveled and I figured out he had outed me to everybody. But it was just, and some people, they had questions, they didn't mean anything bad by them. Some were a little invasive, like, are you going to get the surgery or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's like they were coming at it from trying to gain a new perspective.
Yeah.
Like they weren't coming at it thinking it was invasive. They were just genuinely curious as to what my experiences were and stuff like that. And it was like, that was a little baffling. It's like, wow, you guys knew for 2.5 months and you didn't treat me any differently. That's awesome.
That is wonderful. What an
Yeah.
interesting situation where you're outed,
Very.
but they didn't approach you about it. They let you be. So you're still living in that kind of keeping it on the DL side, and they all know. Well, they know according to what this blabbermouth has said, but I'm sure they probably got it that it was true. But that's amazing that they kept treating you the same way. I love that.
Oh yeah, I left my bottle of estrogen in the security guard shack way too many times for somebody not to see the label.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they figured out 2 + 2,
Yeah, and I'm sure
But-
that's one of those jobs where there's a lot of time where you're just kind of sitting there, nothing to do.
Oh, it's extremely boring.
And you're like, estrogen, looking it up on the phone. What does that do? Estradiol, what does that do?
Right? Yeah, that's when I did a lot of my research on hormones is when I was sitting there doing nothing.
How fun.
That's 90% of the job. Yeah. So that was a very interesting scenario from my life right there.
I
for
can
sure.
imagine.
Thankfully turned out well, but yeah.
I didn't address earlier, but I did like what you had said about the hurdles that you encountered, the majority of which were internal. And, I think that's what I'm trying to kind of focus on tonight with some of these things with talking about coming out and stuff like that is a lot of the biggest hurdles we face are our own internal ones. Either, a denial, a lack of acceptance, internalized transphobia, or just, fear of outcomes and things like that. I think that's very common that we are our own biggest hurt.
Yeah, I would say that's true. At the same time, I'm not entirely sure that I would be saying that my own personal hurdles were internal if things had turned out badly. At that point, I probably would have been calling it an external hurdle or an external source of my own fear that I had internalized. And I guess to an extent, that's still kind of true because it's like I feared how my work would react. I feared how a couple friends might react. I feared how my family would react and stuff like that based on what tends to happen the stories that you read up on the internet that, I mean, yeah, some people have really great coming out stories, but a lot of people have at least a few really bad ones too.
Hmm.
And, you got to think about the kind of political environment you're in and stuff like that as well, and cultural environment. And I wouldn't say that my internal hurdles were ill-founded. I wouldn't say that they were created out of nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I am curious about the perspective that I'd have on it if things had gone south for me more than they had.
Yeah. Again, like I
Yeah.
said, that initial reaction you had with that first friend coming out and getting that extremely positive and warm welcome, I think that goes a really long way for how your
Oh,
perspective
absolutely.
of your whole transition is going to be.
Absolutely true. Yeah. And I've even brought that moment up to her a couple times since then about how much that meant. That first day, not just telling her and then going back and telling the rest of my friends too. And I was so excited and giddy about the whole thing because I was like, oh my God, I'm getting accepted by everyone around me. Like, this is perfect.
Mhm.
Uh, but yeah, you're right. I think it did shape a lot of it
Mhm.
for me.
I've met a couple parents, and I've really tried to hit home on the fact that you accept your kid. Out at an event, and they're bringing their kid to this event, and they're talking about how their child identifies as transgender, and is kind of struggling. It looks like it's sort of new. The kid is kind of young, and they're having a hard time with pronouns and things like that.
Sure.
But you can tell they're trying. And I said, I just really try and hit home with them that it's so important that you show that level of acceptance and that you're here and doing this. This is something that not a lot of trans kids get. And I applaud you. Keep it up. You're doing great.
Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, I understand. It's a different situation for parents as opposed to the people who are actually going through it. Because the person that's going through it has lived with this reality probably for months, if not years, before saying anything to their parents. Whereas it's all, a lot of parents miss even the most obvious signs. And so it's a lot of the time it's very much a shock to them to have to deal with that kind of thing. Um and so, and if, especially if like you're worried about how the world would treat your kid,
Mhm.
you're probably going to be, your protective senses are going to be going off at the same time.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's a completely different processing, uh, completely different type of processing for a parent, I imagine.
Mhm. Is there anything in your journey that,
Very sudden sometimes.
is there any, oh, sorry. Is there
I was
anything,
just saying it's very sudden sometimes.
do you feel that as you've gone through this, is there anything that you've been able to accomplish because of your transition?
Because of my transition, yeah, I would say that I owe a lot of my circumstances in life at the moment to transition. The fact that I had such amazing, significant others. Uh, I don't think I would have had them if I had been cis. Some of the opportunities I've had, I would say definitely, professional and personal. Other than being in a relationship, I think those kinds of things did come to me because I transitioned, and not just because I am trans, but because I would say they didn't come to me because I'm trans. They came to me because I'm more secure and more confident in who I am, and so I'm more willing to put myself out there than I was before. I
Mhm.
mean, to a large extent, I was more willing to fade into the background, and even though there was something in me that was striving to break free constantly that I couldn't name for the longest time, um I was shutting myself away from the world because of my dissociation and my other mental issues and stuff like that, like being depressed. I never got officially diagnosed, but I was a dead ringer for it, so, Uh, and anxiety and stuff like that. it's like, well, if I hadn't banished all of that by starting this process, I don't know where I'd be. I could very well still be living in North Alabama working for whatever, some random mom and pop store somewhere under my parents' roof. Could easily be there. So, I mean, that's definitely an aspect of transition that probably doesn't get talked about enough, as
Yeah.
far as the confidence and feeling of self-worth that can spawn just from the transition itself, for bringing your hormones into balance the way they're supposed to be and stuff like that can have a profound impact.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a big part of it, and that's something that you don't really understand going into it. You know, this is something that you have to do, but you don't really realize the depth of what it will mean to you when you get yourself into alignment like that.
So very true. Because, I mean, you spend long enough out of alignment, you don't really know what your proper alignment is, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Until you align yourself, you don't really know what your potential is.
So, what do you feel is your favorite thing that you've learned along your journey, either about the world around you or about yourself?
I've learned I am a very girly girl
Mm.
for the most part. I would say that's probably one of my favorite parts of everything is just letting my feminine side out and learning what that feminine side is has been this, fem just this extremely feminine spirit, letting it run wild has been extremely rewarding.
Mm.
So yeah, learning that about myself, that I had all of this inside me the whole time, has been really awesome. Definitely.
What advice do you have to give to younger closeted trans folks out there who are looking towards transitioning?
Goodness. I would say there are, of course, valid reasons to be worried, but at the same time, you can't let that stop you from becoming your truest self. Like, I know that the idea of taking hormones might seem extremely scary. Uh, the idea of being wrong probably is what's fueling that fear of hormones, is probably extremely scary. The idea of putting yourself out there into the world might be scary, if you have some social anxiety or something to that effect. Um, the idea of uh, presenting as who you really are might seem scary because you're scared of rejection or how other people might react. And while there are, while your fear is absolutely valid, not just, I mean, while your fear is valid, I would say that the best thing that you can do for yourself overall is to do your absolute best to overcome it bit by bit, one small step at a time. And before you know it, you're running. I would say and like I said, you take it step by step, one little thing after another, and then you're just running far away from where you were. And eventually you look back and you realize how far you've gone. It's a lot further than you thought,
Mhm.
probably. And you owe it to yourself to take that leap. If you're 99% sure, then you should give it a shot. you know,
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be that exact percentage, but you get the idea. If you're pretty dang sure, but you're scared, I would say give it a shot and see what happens.
Mhm.
You know, because it's better to try to overcome that fear than let yourself live in it and and let yourself be affected by it and held back by it.
Well, Alexis, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the Transgender Show, sharing your story and advice for those others out there that will benefit from it.
Thank you so much for having me.